For 100 pages, the report reads like a prosecution. It lists the warnings, it names the signals, it documents the ship that was pulled out and the intelligence that was never updated. And then, in its very last paragraph, it acquits everyone. This is the Franks report, and this is what it actually says. Everyone remembers the Falklands War as a surprise. On the 2nd of April 1982, Argentine forces stormed ashore on a cluster of windswept islands in the South Atlantic, 8,000 miles from London and about 400 miles from Argentina. Around 1,800 people lived there, mostly sheep farmers of British descent. On land, Britain had governed since 1833, and Argentina had claimed the whole time as Las Malvinas. Britain sent a naval task force halfway around the world. 10 weeks later, after 255 British deaths, 649 Argentine deaths, and 3 islanders killed, Argentina surrendered. It became a story of national recovery, of resolve, of a fleet sailing into the unknown. But the war produced one document whose entire job was to answer a single, uncomfortable question. Did it have to be a surprise at all? That document is the Falkland Islands Review, published in January 1983 and known ever since by the name of the man who chaired the committee behind it, Lord Oliver Franks, a former ambassador to Washington. 6 privy councillors, given access to the most secret files in government, cabinet papers, intelligence assessments, diplomatic cables. Their brief was to review how the government had handled the events leading up to the invasion. And what makes the Franks report so strange is that its evidence and its verdict point in opposite directions. Start with the ship. HMS Endurance was a small, lightly armed ice patrol vessel painted bright red, and she was Britain's only permanent naval presence in the entire South Atlantic. She wasn't a warship in any serious sense, but she was a flag. She said Britain was there. In June 1981, John Nott, the Defense Secretary, published a defense review with the confident title, The Way Forward. Buried in the spending cuts was a decision to withdraw HMS Endurance and not replace her after the 1981 to 1982 season. It saved a few £1,000,000. The Foreign Secretary, Lord Carrington, objected, in writing and more than once. His department warned that pulling Endurance out would be read in Buenos Aires as exactly what it looked like. A signal that Britain was losing interest in the islands. The Ministry of Defense refused to reverse it. The Franks report lays all of this out. It records the objection, it records the refusal, and it records that the Argentine Navy did indeed take note. Here was a warning on paper from the government's own foreign secretary about the message Britain was sending. It was overruled to save money. Then there was the law. In 1981, Parliament passed the British Nationality Act. Its purpose had nothing to do with the Falklands. It was about redefining citizenship across what remained of the empire. But its effect was that a large number of Falkland Islanders lost the right to full British citizenship. Think about what that looks like from Argentina. Britain is pulling out its patrol ship, and Britain is passing a law that appears to hold the islanders at arm's length. The Franks report acknowledges this too. That these steps, taken separately and for unrelated reasons, could reasonably have been read by the Argentine government as Britain quietly disengaging. Now, the intelligence. In Britain, secret assessments are pulled together by a body called the Joint Intelligence Committee, the JIC, which takes the raw material from the secret services and produces a considered national judgment. The JIC had looked hard at Argentina and the Falklands and produced a substantial assessment in July 1981. That assessment warned, in effect, that if Argentina concluded peaceful negotiation was hopeless, it might turn to force. It laid out the risk. And here is the finding that sits at the heart of the report. After July 1981, as the situation in Argentina shifted, as a new and more aggressive military junta took power under General Leopoldo Galtieri, in December 1981. As the diplomatic talks stalled, the JIC did not produce another full assessment of the Falklands before the invasion. Nearly 9 months passed. The warning machinery had spoken once and then fallen quiet, precisely as the danger was rising. Franks examined this in detail and concluded that the intelligence organization should have reacted differently, that the assessment should have been revisited as events developed. That is a criticism, in black and white, in the government's own commissioned report. Then came the trigger everyone forgets. On the 19th of March 1982, a group of Argentine scrap metal workers, led by a businessman named Constantino Davidoff, landed on South Georgia, a barren dependency about 800 miles east of the Falklands themselves, supposedly to dismantle old whaling stations. They raised the Argentine flag. It sounds trivial. It was the spark. Britain dispatched HMS Endurance, the very ship it had been trying to retire, to deal with it. And in Buenos Aires, the junta, watching Britain's reaction and reading its own domestic pressures, brought forward a full invasion it had been planning for later in the year. So, by the last days of March 1982, the picture was this: a warning from the Foreign Secretary about withdrawing the patrol ship, overruled; a law that signaled disengagement, passed; an intelligence assessment warning of the use of force, a year old and never renewed; and a live confrontation on South Georgia, escalating by the day. The Franks report documents every one of these threads. It is, for well over 300 paragraphs, a meticulous reconstruction of a government that had the pieces in front of it and did not assemble them in time to send the task force early enough to deter anything. And then you reach the end. The report has 339 numbered paragraphs, and it is that very last one that decides the whole thing. After laying out the withdrawn ship, the misread signals, the stale intelligence, the missed chances, paragraph 339 delivers the committee's judgment. It concludes that they would not be justified in attaching any criticism or blame to the present government for the Argentine junta's decision to commit its act of unprovoked aggression on the 2nd of April 1982. Read that again against everything that came before it. The report spends 100 pages describing warnings and then, in a single closing sentence, decides that none of it adds up to blame. The responsibility, it says, lies with the Argentine junta that pulled the trigger, which is true, and which nobody disputed. But the question Franks was set up to answer was not who invaded. It was whether Britain could and should have seen it coming. The body of the report suggests it could. The last paragraph says nobody is at fault for missing it. That gap did not go unnoticed. When the report was published, it was widely read as a document whose evidence convicted the government and whose verdict acquitted it, a prosecution that ended in a pardon written by the same hand. And it matters that someone had already accepted the blame the report withheld. Lord Carrington, the same Foreign Secretary who had fought to keep HMS Endurance, resigned on the 5th of April, 3 days after the invasion, together with 2 of his Foreign Office ministers. He resigned on principle. The invasion had happened on his watch, and he believed the department had to answer for it. He fell before the inquiry that would later decide, formally, that there was no blame to fall. When the report reached the House of Commons on the 25th of January 1983, the government embraced its conclusion, and the opposition tore at the gap between the evidence and the verdict. The debate turned on exactly that contradiction: how a document could establish so much and conclude so little. But by then the war was won, the fleet was home, and a report that cleared the government suited the mood of a country that had just been told it triumphed. That is the paper trail. The Falklands War is remembered as something that came out of nowhere. The government's own inquiry proves it did not. The warnings were on the record. The Foreign Secretary's objection, the nationality law, the year-old intelligence assessment nobody renewed. Franks found all of it, wrote all of it down, and then, in his final paragraph, decided it wasn't enough to blame anyone. The war everyone remembers as a surprise began with warnings the record shows were there to be read. The document that admits they existed is also the document that decided they didn't matter.